So it's Len Davis with Penn Geology Productions. It's late July 2011, and I'm here with my friend Jim Puckett, who's the director of the Basel Action Network, which is an environmental NGO here in Pioneer Square in Seattle, Washington. And it was 6 years ago that you and I, Jim, went to Lagos, Nigeria to film The Digital Dump.
Yeah.
Crazy that 6 years has passed since then.
Yes, it has gone fast. It was a crazy time. It was one of the most difficult films I've ever been involved with, probably you too as well, because of how hard it is to shoot film in a country like Nigeria on any subject. But when it comes to pointing a spotlight on the electronic waste dumping, a lot of people were beneficiaries of that trade. Were not happy with our expose work. But I have to say that that film has changed the world. Give you some examples. So all the Basel delegates, every country in the world was there to see it at a meeting that happened about 3 years ago in Africa.
And what is a Basel delegate, just to clarify?
So this is a United Nations treaty, and they all come together, every country that's party to it, and there's about 170 countries now. So it's a lot of countries coming together that witness and talk about this whole issue of electronic waste. They unfortunately don't witness it enough. They just deal with paper legalisms, and we were able to show what really goes on the ground. It was a result of that showing that the EU delegate at that meeting, the European Union, said we're going to give $1 million, actually €1 million, so even more than dollars, to fund E-Waste Africa project, or to seed money, provide the seed money for that project, and that was given. And so that project is ongoing right now. It's gotten more donors, so it's even grown. But that has happened. In Europe, because this film was the first time we spotlighted not just dumping per se, but a different type of dumping, which was the claim that this stuff was going to be reused by Africans, that this was going to benefit Africa, therefore we could give them all our electronic junk. And it showed that that was flawed, that theory, that in fact a lot of it was dumped and burned and not used at all in Africa. It was on the basis of that film that the European Union has now changed their laws so that you now have to prove that the stuff is functional before you export it. You can't just load up containers full of stuff and say it's all good. They have to test it, and the onus is on them to prove that it's functional before they export. If not, it's considered hazardous waste. That's going to become the law of the European Union really soon. And it was on the basis of our film that that happened, because it was shown on German television. I don't know if you remember, but I had a deal with German TV to take your footage and to run it. And they ran it. They stuck a microphone in front of the German delegate's government guy, and he said, "Oh, we'll deal with this. This is a big problem. I see that we have a loophole in our laws." So we've gotten major funding to work on the problem. We've gotten laws shifted from that film. It has been shown to the head of state of Nigeria and all the cabinet. I was told, I wasn't there at the time, that it brought tears to the eyes of the president of Nigeria. And it's had a huge impact.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, I mean, I remember there were articles in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, other newspapers around the world, shown at film festivals, shown at conferences. Give me a little sense of, I heard you say 60 Minutes and Frontline. Tell me a little bit more about this sort of spectrum of places that the film has been shown.
Well, since, of course, we went to Nigeria and West Africa at all, we were the first ones to do that. Many journalists have followed in our footsteps. So CNN, BBC were there, National Geographic went to Ghana, Frontline went to Ghana. A lot of people shifted to Ghana because it's easier to film in Ghana. And a similar type of situations going on there. Not quite the scale of what we saw and the amount of containers coming in, but really poignant, powerful imagery also in Ghana. So West Africa has, in general, received the attention it needed to start to deal with this problem. It's been really slow getting real solutions, but they're starting to come. And the science has now followed as well. So we didn't take any samples of the contamination. That wasn't our job at the time. But since we did our work now, the Blacksmith Institute has been in there. Professor Osibanjo has done some more sampling and studies.
And he was the professor that was in the film who was talking about having his graduate students grinding up like cell phone batteries and talking about the impact of those chemicals leaching into the water table and other stuff.
And he has become very prominent on this issue now. So that was a very great result of our film also, is that he was sitting in this backwater university trying to find the funding to do this kind of work, and now he has plenty of funding. So he's local there, working on the problem. Things are shifting at a glacial pace, but they are shifting in West Africa. They're realizing they have to also have a law, so Nigeria is about ready to, how long has it been? 6 years now. They finally are going to adopt a law that prohibits the import of this stuff unless it's fully functional and tested. Mm-hmm. But of course there was a lot of resistance. A lot of people in Nigeria are making money from this, and high-level people were obviously skimming some of those profits. So it's been slow getting progress on the ground, but it's happening.
Yeah, I remember 2, maybe 3 years ago, hearing in the news here in Seattle that some other Seattle-based filmmakers had been in Nigeria filming this film about the Niger
Oil,
Delta,
yeah.
and I think it was called Black Cruise,
Right.
About the oil controversy in Nigeria and how they were detained by the authorities and spent time in jail, and it was this international fiasco.
Right.
And when I heard all that, I just sort of thought, on some level, that could have been us. Do you remember how crazy it was? I mean, it really felt like we were sort of fronting as we were, supporting the e-waste trade and the digital divide, bridging the digital divide, but it was really just sort of down, dirty, investigative journalism. And I just remember being in some situations where we really felt pretty vulnerable.
Now, there were some scary moments. So there was a time when we thought all our equipment, if not ourselves, would be broken up in the back of that warehouse where we were confronted by a dealer, by a trader that tried to accuse us of being racist and making the film for ulterior motives. So we had to talk our way out of that one. I remember also that same trip. Do you remember when the driver said, "Just slam the door and let's get going"? It was the military.
Right.
It was the military that we were slamming the door on and peeling out. He said, "No, they'll just want to bribe," and then we roared off. So luckily we had a driver that was very street savvy, who also used to be in the military, and you can't do a lot in Nigeria without getting permission, paying for police. We had to go through the markets by having an escort of police, if you recall, and I had to pay them, private police, but I had to pay them, and you don't get very far with a camera in Nigeria without those kind of things.
Yeah, I remember we were in Nigeria exactly when Katrina hit, and just watching, we were in that tiny restaurant in the hotel we were staying in, and just watching those images on African or World CNN, and thinking how crazy it was to be seeing what was going on back home, and being surrounded by various other Africans sitting in the restaurant watching on TV thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah, I remember that was poignant because when we walked out of our hotel room, we were in a dysfunctional world, really. Lagos is not a functional city, just very tragic. And then we're looking at America on the tube, and the same imagery, the same dysfunctionality, the same chaos. And the Africans that were sitting there watching it with us, I remember them saying, "That's America?" And it was pretty powerful. But we were removed from it at that time, except by the imagery on the tube. But we would step out of the hotel room and try to make our way through the traffic of Lagos. Took sometimes half a day to get across town.
Crazy.
And we had to use motorbikes sometimes, and that was even crazier.
Yeah, so we're here today, 6 years later. Tell me a little bit about, it's kind of, in some ways, it was a great cycle for you to give me a call last week and ask me to come and film the press conference that you had here today.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, we have moved toward trying to solve this problem working with industry, because we find a lot of the industry is more progressive than our own government. So we have problems moving even the Obama administration to do the right thing, to do the obvious thing, which is to prohibit this type of export of toxic materials to developing countries. They won't do it. We have companies like Dell, Samsung, LG that agree that that's the thing that should be done. So we're getting more progress working with partnership with corporations. And so we have a program to do that called eStewards, which first recognizes the good recyclers that refuse to export, and we certify them and audit them to make sure they're not playing any games with that. And then we have another group of companies that are the major users of electronics, like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, and today we got LG on board. They're now agreeing that all the electronics that they control, which is massive, so it's not, for a company like LG, it's not only what they use in their offices, but all their off-spec stuff from production. All of that is they're going to try to direct to our good recyclers, our eStewards recyclers. So that's keeping us very busy, and we're also ramping up our exposés on the cheaters. So there's a company we outed in Chicago just last week that we sent our investigators and filmed the containers in their yard. We tracked those containers full of their electronic waste to Hong Kong. We called up the Hong Kong authorities. They said, sure enough, this is illegal. Sent it back. So that company was wanting to be one of our East Stewards recyclers at the same time, and we said, sorry, you're out of the program. Zip. So we're doing those kind of exposés too, which is sending a very strong message in the marketplace.
So how do you, I mean, what's the progress of the East Stewards program and the promise of what that represents? Can you sort of fill in the notion that at one level you're recognizing the advances in technology, and it's not about trying to in any way slow all the gadgetry and all the sort of innovation, but it's a recognition of the reality that just the obsolescence, the immediate obsolescence of things that came out 2 years ago, and the billions of tons of stuff that we're generating. What does that really look like in terms of the reality that we will continue to generate waste, but how does a company like an LG or a Dell Computers, what does that mean? Does that mean putting the sort of pressure on them with the original materials that the electronics are built with? Does it mean them taking responsibility for taking back into their possession the things after their lifetime? I mean, when you talk about the East Stewards program having to prove the validity of the things that are going in containers, to me that's a little confusing, because then it comes back to, well, isn't that more oriented toward the bridging the digital divide and ensuring that they have a life wherever they're going, as opposed to the reality of how to disassemble them and responsibly recycle the pieces?
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
You went all over the place. But you're right. There are three main goals we have, and we have to start at the most serious, egregious stuff first. So the most serious, egregious stuff is this global dumping that's going on. But at the same time, we're very fully aware that if this stuff wasn't toxic, there wouldn't be such a problem. So at the same time, we're working in a coalition of groups that are trying to get the industries like LG and Samsung get the toxics out at the front end. Okay? The focus on the back end and how dirty it is and how egregious and scandalous it is helps that. So we shine a spotlight on what's very obviously a problem that is created by their design in the beginning. When you design things that have toxic materials in them from the get-go, it's going to be toxics in, toxic out at some point. And with our global world and globalization and the pathways that are so easy to exploit the poor, they're going to be the ones that are poisoned, not us. So we point a spotlight on that. So that's the most egregious thing. Stop the global dumping. Same time, get the toxics out on the front end, designed for green design, easy recycling, toxic-free materials and products. Then the third one, which is going to be the tougher nut to crack, is minimizing consumption generally. And that's where it's going to be tougher to work with industry, because right now they have no incentive to not have you buy something every 5 seconds. They want you to churn and burn product. They want you to buy as soon as possible. And unless we go to another type of system that's not owner-based, but maybe lease-based, there's no incentive for them in a market campaign to agree with us on that. They can agree with us on getting rid of the toxics, and they can sell greener products by bragging about them. But where they're not going to be easily persuaded is we don't need to produce so much stuff. We shouldn't be churning through our resources and hardware and burning energy to produce this as rapidly as we do now. And that will take a different type of effort. Again, there's ways to do it, but those are the three main thrusts that we have. Stop the cheap and dirty dumping, get the toxics out at the front end, green design, and then we're going to have to move on to less consumption generally.
Amazing. I think one of the things that I took out of working on the project with you and just learning about this was just how many facets of the sort of, just how many issues, overlapping issues that we face as a planet, and in terms of, you know, geopolitics and environmental issues and consumerism
and the nexus is really, this
education
e-waste issue really brings them all together. That's why I really love working on it, because it wakes up the world to so many problems, not just toxics. It's all about how we design things for society generally. It's about how we trade on this planet, how our economic system benefits the rich and, you know, exploits the poor. The pathways of so-called free trade, how unfree they are. All of this is very plain to anybody, whatever persuasion, when they look at the e-waste story. It's all about externalizing costs to others. You know, I don't want to pay for this myself. I'm going to make those people in Ghana pay the price. And that's really what's happening when people realize that that's pretty obscene, and they do it because they all have electronic waste in their hands. They go, oh my God, this is something that I'm doing. This is something I of a piece of. And so it's very powerful.
Amazing. Well, I'm Len Davis with Pangelli Productions. I'm here with Jim Puckett, the director of the Basel Action Network. And it's great to be back with you, Jim, 6 years later.
Yeah, we'll do another one of these things one of these days.
Cool. I look forward to it.
Okay,
Thanks for calling me. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.